Representative Hoxha.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Um, if I recall correctly, you closed off your opening statement with something to the effect of no, nothing should ever get in between, a voter and the polling place, um, probably in reference to or what you may have had in mind. And correct me if I'm wrong. It's part of the question that I'm asking. Did you have some sort of like governmental institution in mind as that potential thing that could get in the way between a voter and the polling place, if not for the passage of this bill? And if so, can you name me an instance of a governmental institution, um, in the modern age being able to get in the way here in Connecticut, get in the way of a voter from voting?
Sure. I mean, I think that there's a lot of examples of government getting in the way of the access to the ballot, you know, both in the United States in our history, but also just baked into Connecticut law, right? Which is why we have to come before you all and advocate for expanding access to voting. And so, the way that voting is laid out in our Constitution required that we had to amend our Constitution to allow for in-person early voting. That's one example of an incredibly high hurdle placed between voters and the access to the ballot. And we know that the voters that are most impacted by these hurdles are voters who have historically been oppressed by the United States government. So it is first and foremost Black voters, and then it is voters for whom language access has always been a problem, and so forth. So there's no shortage of examples, and even very recently of federal and state government and city government coming between voters and our access to voting.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, I would argue that there is a shortage of examples because I gave you an opportunity to name me some, and you didn't really give me any examples. So I'll rephrase the question. It is the year 2023. Short of passage of this bill, is it your belief that there are institutional forces at play that are preventing people from voting today in the state of Connecticut?
Sure. Well, I just gave you one example from, the debate that you're having in the legislature right now about multiple, like whether to mandate multiple early voting sites in towns and municipalities that have a population of over, like, let's say 50,000 people. That is you all deciding who and how and when people get access to in-person early voting, which the voters of Connecticut overwhelmingly approved. If you choose not to mandate multiple sites in large cities, you are effectively restricting the access to the ballot for people who live in large cities. And in Connecticut, the people who live in large cities are predominantly Black and brown individuals, voters. So that's one very concrete example that is happening right now, currently, in the legislature.
Okay, well, I appreciate you, being able to come up with a type of example there. And through you, Mr. Chair, just, one last sort of, remark here. It's easy to continue to move the goalposts further and further away from this kind of abstract goal of, making it easier, infinitely easier for voters to vote. I've worked on campaigns, statewide campaigns. I've been to virtually almost every single town or city in the state of Connecticut, including the Bridgeports, New Havens, Hartfords, Waterburys. And, it really doesn't seem to me, at least from what I've seen, that this issue really, exists to this extent, that you're that it seems that you're making it out to be in support of this bill that you argue is a remedy to this issue that I personally don't see. We recently passed via referendum the ability for the legislature to legislate an early voting kind of procedure. And prior to that, it seems like you're saying to me that anything prior to the next kind of advancement we make was a sort of oppressive system that we had in place. So it just seems to me that there's really no kind of clearly defined objective to this bill or the argument at large, because it just seems like the goalposts are always continue to move, no matter how many good faith attempts anyone makes at alleviating some legitimate concerns, which, like Senator Sampson brought up, the issue with, potentially long lines and things of that nature that have tangible remedies, which I'm all for in instances where it could be shown clearly that that is an issue. So I appreciate, you offering those examples, and, the example of, how, language could be a barrier for some voters, and that, having signage in different languages and things like that can make it easier for people to vote. But I just really don't see this, the way you see it. But either way, thank you very much. And back to you, Mr. Chair.